With Fred Trump. I saw your interview with Fred Trump. I thought that was one of the most tawdry and irresponsible pieces of journalism I have ever seen. Donald Trump wins a conclusive mandate.
Although Trump has now been elected as president for a second non-consecutive term, the media is still not having it. Trump's team has been locked in a grueling battle to clear the smoke, but Fred Fleitz has finally had enough. He lashed out and left no cribs untouched.
Well, one person who was not on the stage with Donald Trump last night is his nephew, Fred Trump. He voted for Kamala Harris. He joins me now. Good to see you again, Fred. One would have thought, because your blood, your family, that after such an event, you know, your uncle's been president twice now, that you might be on that stage. Why not?
Well, he and I have had some big-time differences over the past couple of years, namely when he said my son should just die because he has disabilities, but also because
did he actually say that?
He said that.
It all began with anchor Matt Fate, who's never been shy about his disdain for Trump, calling his Kamala-supporting nephew and painting President-elect Trump as a full-blown villain.
And we'd go to movies together, and we spent many good times together.
You were fond of him?
He was a good uncle.
And he was fond of you?
He was, yes. I reminded him of the good things of my father.
And has that Donald Trump disappeared?
I think it has, unfortunately. He plays the populist, and good for him.
Fred Fleitz was fuming over the derogatory interview, a blatant character assassination filled with accusations of Trump being unreasonable and somewhat a risk.
Personally, I think his followers are believing everything he says, and that could be a danger.
But the Donald Trump that moves into the White House again for the second time, what kind of Donald Trump will that be?
I said often that, is it worth the risk that Donald will put everything or some things behind him and advance the country forward in a positive way?
Fred Trump didn't hold back against his uncle, labeling him a threat and slyly suggesting that Trump supporters were nothing short of a cult.
Now is Fred Fleitz, who has worked for the CIA and the Department of Defense and worked for the National Security Council during the first Trump administration. He's now at the America First Policy Institute. Fred, it's good to have you on the program. Let's go through a number of key issues. Let's start with NATO. Is he going to pull America out of NATO?
No, I want to start with Fred Trump. I saw your interview with Fred Trump. I thought that was one of the most tawdry and irresponsible pieces of journalism I have ever seen.
Frederick H. Fleitz Jr., former U.S. government official and current vice chairman of the America First Policy Institute Center for American Security, was brought in for an interview to discuss potential policy changes. But Fred was already seething with anger over the biased journalism.
Global security, and you pull up some relative I've never heard of, I've never seen on TV, to whine about Trump for 5 minutes. It simply goes how the liberal British elite are out to get Trump. They're not interested in objective journalism. Right. That's why the British people were so surprised at this outcome. They've seen these lies on your channel, in the BBC, in The Economist. So, I mean, I don't even know what the point is talking with you. You're so incredibly biased. I think Trump is going to remake global politics.
It's no secret that the British Prime Minister was all in on promoting Kamala, even sending Labour diplomats to back her campaign. But after her loss, both the British media and government seemed unwilling to accept it.
May I respond to that?
Right.
Look, Donald Trump's tenure as president was pretty good for the UK, was pretty good for Europe. I seem to remember the Ukraine war started under Joe Biden. That's something I don't think we're going to hear on your channel.
I was hoping to, let me just say, I was hoping to get to all those points, and I'm glad that you've done that. But he was talking about family, and as far as I know, you're not a member of the Trump family. We were talking about personal stuff, and that was very much his personal view. He wasn't.
Ever since the election campaigns heated up, the British media hasn't held back in slinging bias at Trump. And even after his win, one particular channel had the audacity to bring on some random nephew instead of tackling real issues.
Let's try and be responsible then and talk about the issues at hand. NATO. Will he pull out of NATO or not?
Donald Trump has made very clear in his America First approach to U.S. national security that he wants a strong president, a strong national security policy, a strong military to work in cooperation with our allies and alliances, but also to make sure that members of these alliances carry their own weight. I'm not going to speak for Trump on how he's going to do this. I will say he's going to be...
Anchor Matt Frey was left speechless, fumbling under Fred's barrage. As Fred pushed forward, Frey began to retreat, and Fred eventually steered the conversation to the real issues, like NATO.
Of being in office, how do you think he's going to do that?
You know, the issue for the war in Ukraine is that we have a situation where we have American and British and European politicians who are sending weapons to Ukraine for as long as it takes, but there's no strategy to end the war. They're basically doing this for virtue signaling. They think Putin is evil. They want to send weapons there, but this is promoting a war of attrition that is killing all the
The UK has been deeply concerned by Trump's stance on the Ukraine war, especially as he voiced strong support for Ukraine. While the UK has been taking the lead, it hasn't led to a ceasefire. With Trump's assertion, the UK might feel its role could be sidelined.
We're going to start to end the war, and this is my opinion what Mr. Trump will do, by having a president determined to stop it, to start negotiations. So how he's going to do that, he hasn't told me his plan, but I think the first step to ending the war is to have a world leader who wants to end the war.
Fred has been in the office long enough to master the art of handling questions with ease. Despite the anchor's doubts about Trump's role, he coolly defends it.
I know that in the first Trump administration, correct me if I'm wrong, that there were divisions within the cabinet about how to deal with Iran. Some people wanted intervention, others didn't. You now have got this war with Iran and Israel. What do you think he'll do about that?
Well, I heard Nick Mulvaney complaining about who might be in the Trump cabinet. I'll tell you, there will be quite a few very qualified national security experts.
Sensing the Ukraine issue wasn't going well, Matt quickly shifts to Iran, but Fred is ready with answers up his sleeve.
If he did not apologize, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
We discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
Will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking you, Mr. Speaker, to extend an invitation to President Trump to address Parliament on his next visit?
These aren't Churchillian Tories anymore. If anything, they behave more and more like Donald Trump. It's all woke, woke, woke. Wedge, wedge, wedge. Divide, divide.
The media bias primarily stems from the Starmer-led government siding with Kamala, but the leader of the opposition was quick to remind them to settle the terms with Trump. The UK media and the Starmer-led government's bias against Trump is hardly a secret. But how will the UK media respond after Trump assumes the office? Will we see even more anti-Trump coverage, or will they finally put an end to this ongoing bias? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.